electro cop when he sees the MP5 SD.
I like this camera.
Hey everyone, Moogie here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the most affordable MP5 SD on the market at the moment. This is the MKE AP5 SD imported by Century Arms. What's really cool about these is they're imported with all the SD parts already installed, so it makes for a really simple conversion. So today, we're going to be taking a look at 2 different ways that you can suppress this to turn it into the MP5 SD of your dreams. The MP5 SD is, without a doubt, one of the most iconic and recognizable suppressed submachine guns, having been featured in countless movies, TV shows, and video games. Needless to say, it's clear why the firearm is so desired, and for the first time, we have a large volume commercially produced version of the MP5 SD, being brought in by Century Arms under the MKE AP5 SD. What's super cool about this clone is its low price point at around 1600 MAP, while retaining all the cool MP5 SD looks. In order to release a product that could appeal to the largest audience as possible, MKE did make this a non-NFA pistol with a fake suppressor. However, we will be talking about the different ways one can suppress this firearm later on. But first, we need to talk a little bit about the history of the MP5 SD and what makes this suppressed version of the MP5 so unique. The MP5 SD's story begins with the H&K MP5, introduced in 1966. This submachine gun derived its operating mechanism from the G3 battle rifle's roller-delayed blowback system. This system allows for a lighter weight bolt that effectively reduces felt recoil, while also allowing the firearm to be more accurate, as the pressure in the barrel is more consistent after each shot is fired, before the bolt unlocks. By the late 1960s, NATO Special Operations Forces sought a suppressed counterpart to enable covert engagements, prompting H&K to explore integrating a suppressor directly into the MP5's architecture. The first MP5 SD prototype featured a wire mesh suppressor, much like the wire mesh suppressor of the grease gun. However, this design choice proved problematic. The suppressor, wrapped around the barrel, aimed to dissipate gases through mesh layers. However, fouling accumulated rapidly, degrading performance after just 70 rounds. Field tests highlighted critical shortcomings: the mesh trapped carbon buildup, increasing back pressure, and necessitating frequent cleaning. Despite its failure, this iteration validated the concept of an integrally suppressed MP5, spurring H&K to refine the design. Between 1970 and 1972, H&K engineers reimagined the suppressor using lightweight aluminum. The revised design featured a tubular body housing a baffle system machined from square aluminum tubing. Concurrently, the barrel was ported immediately ahead of the chamber, bleeding off pressure to reduce muzzle velocity below the speed of sound. This innovation allowed supersonic 9mm ammunition to function subsonically, and allowed units that deployed the MP5 SD to use standard ammunition instead of needing specialty subsonic 9mm, as at this point in time, subsonic ammunition was far less common. In order to accommodate the suppressor, the handguards had to be redesigned into a larger tubular shape. A heat shield was installed and the tops were open to allow dissipation of heat, and an insulated ribbed rubber exterior was added for improved grip. These features combined give the MP5 SD a unique look, and cloning one could be quite expensive, as original MP5 SD parts are harder to obtain. A decent clone could easily reach $5,000 or more, especially if you use an SP5 as a base. However, the AP5 SD, now on the market, fairly accurate-looking clones can be made for a fraction of the price. The AP5 SD has all of the external features you would want out of a clone, and certainly looks the part with the larger handguards, the SD-style sights, the Navy-style full auto selector markings, and the fake suppressor. However, the fake suppressor is what makes this stand out compared to the real deal. The fake suppressor is basically a large empty can that screws onto the end of the barrel, and effectively acts as sort of a loudener, the opposite of what one would want from an MP5 SD clone. But This does allow MKE to sell a product on the market that is not NFA. However, suppressing the firearm is fairly easy. The AP5 SD has a 5.75-inch barrel like the originals, but with 1/2x28 threads and a tri-lug at the end of the barrel, instead of at the base of the barrel like the originals. And yes, I know the purists are going to cringe, but hear me out, as I will talk about clone correct options in a minute. The space under the handguards of the AP5 gives more than enough room to install a 6-inch 9mm suppressor at the end of the barrel, and the length comes out to the same as the original MP5 SD length. For example, here I simply installed a 6-inch B&T suppressor I had laying around. And while a thicker suppressor would look more correct, you can see how you can easily use just about any off-the-shelf suppressor on this firearm. With the high availability of subsonic 9mm on the commercial market today, and the advancement of suppressor technology, for most people this is honestly a great option to have the MP5 SD at home for around $2,000 when you combine it with a suppressor, with the added benefit that the suppressor is not dedicated to your MP5 SD, and can be removed and used on your other 9mm carbines if you so desire. But there will always be the purists who want a clone correct copy, one that has all the internals of the original, and yes, I do think that is the best way to build one of these, as it is super cool with the integral suppressor that can effectively use any supersonic 9mm round on the market, and use the ported barrel to reduce muzzle velocity through gas bleed-out to ensure the firearm always shoots at subsonic levels. To do this, the barrel will need to be removed and replaced with a proper ported MP5 SD barrel with the threads at the base. Once that is done, a proper dedicated MP5 SD suppressor will need to be purchased and installed. But even with all of that work and the cost of the suppressor, the total cost using the AP5 SD as a base is likely somewhere in the $3,000 range, which is much more affordable than options previously available on the market. While I do understand why purists are upset that the AP5 SD does not have a proper MP5 SD style barrel installed, I do think that MKE made the right choice from a business standpoint to make the firearm in the way that they did, as overall it will appeal to the broader market, and those who want it clone correct can still do so by sending their firearm off to an appropriate gunsmith to have the barrel replaced. It should be noted that in Europe, the AP5 SD is sold as the MKE T94 SD, and in many of those countries, they are sold with a ported barrel and a suppressor, as suppressors are not as regulated over there as they are here. However, due to the quirks of the US NFA laws, I think MKE did what they could to bring us a super cool firearm that, honestly, I think it is fine, as it does offer more versatility to the end consumer.
And that was the MKE AP5 SD. We should be having some of these available soon at Tracks and Armaments, so please feel free to check that out. Well, see you next time!